Before we get started, friends, I just wanted to give a special shout out to a new patron for Best Forevers, and that is the podcasters over at Boozy Buddies. Cheers to friendship, right? Gotta play off that alcohol theme. And I know some of you are like, this is a clean cut friendship podcast. And that I agree. I try to be, family friendly, but sometimes we're not. And sometimes friends get together and drink. And if you like that, then go have a listen to Boozy Buddies. And you can find them in my show notes. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a patron and friend of Best Forevers, go to patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Let's go ahead and get started. You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for Kindred Spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and I'm feeling very grateful. I've just celebrated 2 years of Best Forevers, a podcast for Kindred Spirits, and I am nearing 100 episodes. And if you've listened to this entire journey, or you just started the journey with me, or you've been here on bits and pieces, certain parts of the trip, then I am so thankful to have you here with me on this journey to love on our friends more. And I appreciate your listens so much because it says to me that there are people like me who believe friendship are important and that they should not be ignored. And not only that, because we should definitely celebrate them, but that there are a lot of problems that friends experience, and we should do what we can to solve those problems because our friends mean so much to us. So, gearing up for episode 100, 99 is going to be scandalous. It is our Halloween-themed episode, and it'll be the spookiest friendship stories and confessions. And so if you have something you'd like to share, I need those by October 21st, and I will be telling the tales for Halloween. And you can either email me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com, or if you go on my social media links, I have been sharing a link to a space where you can anonymously share your stories or confessions, because sometimes people don't want others to know. And no matter what, I'm going to use pseudonyms. So no worries, you are free to confess. And then after the Halloween episode, we'll hit 100 episodes, and I'm so excited. And I know in this podcast, as part of what I do, I share experiences about friendships. I talk to others about their friendships. And so through all that, you might learn a little bit about me as the host, but also sometimes there's questions. And so listeners have questions. Some of my students who are listeners, some who are not, have questions about me as well. So I've collected a number of these, and it's my first bonus episode of Ask Me Anything, and that's also known as AMA. So this bonus episode will cover some of the questions I got, and then there will be another bonus episode of some of the other questions I received, and then we will start back with Halloween, the 100th episode, and so much more friendship to come. So I organized these in a way that made sense. So I have some that are podcast related and personal related. I have some related to friendships and relationships, and then I have some that are random and fun. And if you have any questions for me, I always welcome them. You can email me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com, or message me on any of the social media sites, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, and that's Best Forevers Pod. So here we go. One of the questions that I get a lot is, what made you want to start a podcast? And I think this is something that a lot of people might consider, like, why did you start doing something, some hobby, some sort of mission, or some new purpose in life, or starting a business, or starting a side hustle, starting a hobby? There's something that we might need or want, or we might not realize that we need or want something. And I think after I really started listening to podcasts in the summer of 2016, I really saw that even though I was listening to true crime podcasts like My Favorite Murder and Serial and Criminal, and then my favorite podcast, The Dollop, with Dave Anthony and Gareth Reynolds, that I started to see that even though those are topics like true crime and history and comedy, that although I'm not necessarily that comedian and I do have Fatalities podcast, which started a year later, that I wanted to start a podcast because I felt like it was a great way to be able to share your voice about something that means a lot to you, or something that you're really passionate about in some way. Is it something that you enjoy? Like I know Dave Anthony, for example, has talked about a lot of really being into history, and that on My Favorite Murder, they talk about always being into true crime, and that's something that I'm also into. But one of the things that I saw was also that there was a void in getting information to people about friendship. And I was just tired of friendship being sort of like this, like pushed aside relationship. I mean, I've always loved friendship. I'm going to record with my parents and we're going to talk about me as a kid with friends and things like that. I think that'll be a fun interview coming up so you can get to know more about me, but also think about how we communicate friendship over the lifespan and how our parents might play a role, like I talked about in episode 8, Tomodachi, with that family. But I think that's really important. And basically, as you know, I've loved friendship my entire life. And I just felt like there's a void. Like, I want to help people. I want people to care about friendships. I want them to think about friendships. I want them to maintain their friendships. And I teach and I love it. And I think students learn a lot and I learn a lot from them, and I do research, and so there's an outlet there. I have service, so I talk about friendship and presentations across campus, but I still felt like the people who might want the information the most, people who are interested, there are people out there who want to listen to podcasts, and that's why I wanted to start it. I wanted other people to love on friendship like I did, or if they're a lot like me and want to love on friendship, then they have a group to come to and be like, we like the same things. And I just like the idea that I can do what I want. I'm in charge of my life. I'm in charge of my podcast. There's so many topics that I can discuss. There's so many people I can talk to, and there's lots of things that I can cover. And even in last week's episode, Be Your Own Best Friend, not only was that something that I thought might be helpful to other people, but that was helpful to me in the moment. So doing the podcast has been quite an amazing experience. And when I first started it, it was just to get my voice out there and hopefully have other people listen and care about friendship. And it's turned out to be so much more for me, myself, and hopefully to a lot of you listeners. I love this. This is from one of my students, and I can hear him saying this, and he has he's so funny. How many episodes do you think your friendship podcast will reach before it's over? And what I say to this student is, there is no end sight at all. I don't think there's an expiration date on friendship, unless there's some fancy new way to do podcasting that's no longer podcasting. Maybe there's some new venue or medium that we use. But I think that there is enough topics and enough friendships to discuss for the rest of time. For as long as my voice will carry that message, for as long as my heart will carry that message, and that's what I think about that. So those are a couple of questions that I had about the podcast. I had several that were related to, why did you want to start it? And I think it's really great because I can also turn to students and see what are some of the things that you're experiencing, and a lot of topics in class inspire episodes. And so I see everything that I do kind of coming together and being connected in some way. Okay. So this next question is from one of my students. It says, what is the biggest advantage of having only one close friend versus many semi-close friends? And so one of the things that I would say is the advantage is having that person. And I always think of Grey's Anatomy. I think of Meredith and I think of Christina. And it's like, you're my person. And, I think it feels good to know that in that one friend, you have someone who is trustworthy and reliable, and you know that they know you inside and out, and they're honest with you when you need that honesty. They might play with those kid gloves when you need the kid gloves. And I think semi-close friends, unless, you're someone who perhaps is not interested in having high levels of intimacy, which might be the case. I think that the one close friend allows you to be sure you do have that person versus having several semi close friends that you might not be able to depend on. Certainly, are there advantages to having several close friends or semi close friends? There are. That's not how the question was worded. And so I think that's what the student is asking. And, just since we're talking about it, one of the advantages of having many friends is that, I mean, just think of life schedules as it is, midterms, and it's like, okay, that friend's busy, that we have semi close friends. They might cover different aspects of our life, and therefore we could talk to them about different things. But that one person is probably going to drop everything and talk to you about it anyways. So I love to hear what people think. Are you someone who has one close friend, or are you someone who has multiple semi close friends? And do you think, what works for you? Because I don't want to say that one is better than the other. I think it's what kind of friendships are we looking for and what works best for us. But I'd love to hear from people who has one really close friend and what has that been like for you? Is there someone out there who's had semi-close friends? And certainly, tell me about that as well. And what I like about the AMAs, like doing the Ask Me Anything and then the confessions for Halloween, is then we start to get some other ideas of episodes. So that student who has how many episodes? 1,000 trillion a billion, because there's so many things that we can discuss. I don't know if that's real numbers, but it's fine. So the next one is, what are your views on platonic friendships? And so, judging by this question, I think that would refer to something that is experienced in a heterosexual normative society, which is cross-sex friendships, where you have heterosexual male and females who are friends, and so this idea that in our society, there's always this pressure that if you're heterosexual, and sometimes if they're not sure on your sexual identity, they will assume heterosexual, and they will be like, oh, you guys should give it a chance. So when are you gonna start dating? When will we hear wedding bells? And it's like, this person is like my brother. Like, so one of the things, my views on platonic friendships is, I have a couple thoughts about it. I think it can be more challenging in heterosexual relationships, for example, or in non-heterosexual relationships where there's a potential for romance, right? That one of the things is that if you're making new friends that are becoming closer and closer after you've made this relationship a dating relationship, doesn't mean it can't work. I think it can make it challenging for the romantic relationship, because the person, your partner, might go, well, why are you making friends now? Or if you were doing things with your partner, but now you're doing them with this other person, and they see there as being potential for romance. I think that can be challenging. And so that's something that you and your partner would want to talk about. But I think platonic friendships are absolutely necessary. I think, like other friendships, they offer lots of great benefits. And I think that, though, because of cultural, societal pressure and sometimes pressure from friends and family and coworkers, that there's this romantic lens that is forced onto people. But I think friends are important, and I think there's a lot of wonderful things that we can learn from other people. And so I am for platonic friendships. But when it gets into those challenges, I think that's something that, just a conversation, I think, would be appropriate. But there's nothing wrong with being friends with people. And just think of all the things that we miss out just because we're like, well, that person's a dude, so I can't be friends with them, or that lady over there, I can't be friends with her because she's a lady. Like, no, let's not do that. Okay, so the next question is, what was your favorite experience with your best friends growing up? So there's a couple experiences. My friend Allison and we used to walk up to Quality Dairy, which is I believe it's only a southern, like a lower Michigan area store, like in the Lansing area where I grew up. And it's like the fancy convenience store. I would compare it to like Wawa's, I guess. People might want to fight me on that. I lived in Pennsylvania. I didn't live in Philly. But that's what I would at least compare it to, it's not just like a convenience store. They make donuts and they have ice cream, and it's just one of the places you always stop and get candy before you go to the movies. Sorry, movie theaters, people sneak stuff into the movies because I'd rather pay for $1 for my candy instead of, $73 in my firstborn child. But we used to walk up to the store and we would get candy and drinks. And I remember when I was a kid, like clearly Canadian and other sort of like fruity flavor, kind of like the LaCroix, but back in the day when I was a kid, they were in these glass bottles, and there were some that looked like wine coolers. And I remember us walking home from Quality Dairy and people stopping us and be like, "You can't drink that, you're underage." And it's like, "Hey lady, this is a fruit beverage." So I remember that being a lot of fun. And I do remember Allison, Ann, and I watching movies, lots of slumber parties with my friend Ann, where it was the two of us. Oh my goodness. I'm just like remembering all these things. My friend Ann and I used to play like different types of house, and we grew up in the 80s and 90s, and one of our favorite movies, and I don't know, I'll have to ask her, but one of my favorite movies of all time is Pretty in Pink. Talk about platonic friendship that kind of goes down the route of unrequited love, so there's lots going on there for that previous question. But I think that that was also her favorite movie, or at least it was at the time. And so you have Molly Ringwald, who's Andy, and she's like the poor girl on the wrong side of the track, because that's sort of like the 80s John Hughes trope, or just movie tropes in general. And she was so cool, and she designed all of her own clothes, so she really was resourceful in making it work, and she was super stylish, and she had a lot of people who admired her, including her best friend Ducky, played by John Cryer. And then she has a crush on Blaine, played by Andrew McCarthy, and he's like the rich kid. So Ducky and Andy are from similar neighborhoods, similar backgrounds, things like that. Ducky has a crush on her, and then you have Blaine, who's like the rich kid. So they're really like intermixing class, which is a really, a fascinating topic. Like, how does that work? And thinking about now, like the 1% versus the non 1%, or you're seeing things like, do celebrities understand what like normal folk go through? And I mean, it's quite a fascinating story, if you will. And but we used to play house, and it was like, whose boyfriend was going to be Blaine that day, or was it Ducky? And I want to say we wanted it to be Blaine, but now looking back, I'm like, we were wrong. We should have picked Ducky. So if you've watched Pretty in Pink, sound off. Would you, if you were like 11 years old, who do you want to be your boyfriend? Would have been Blaine, played by Andrew McCarthy. Notice the tone on Blaine. Or would you have rather it have been Ducky, played by John Cryer? Let me know. We'll definitely have a poll online, because we need to answer this definitively in social media, because is anything real unless you do a poll on Twitter? Okay, so it moves into some other like more personal type questions, and then into some fun questions. So one of these questions from my students is, have you ever been a procrastinator? How can I become less of a procrastinator? And what I say to you, young scholar, is you let me know when you figure out how to become less of a procrastinator, because yes, the person who is teaching you can be a procrastinator, and I think we all can be. But I do think I've played that self-deception of, I work better under pressure. So when I was in college, I can write that paper in an hour. The narrator, she could not write that paper in an hour. You know what I mean? I would say that when I get stressed or anxious, as I talked about in the last episode, Be Your Own Best Friend, that I have a difficult time concentrating and I forget things. And so I think sometimes that turns me into a procrastinator. And I've also always wondered how to do long type projects. And you're like, hey, aren't you celebrating 2 years of Best Forevers? Yes. And I think I've only missed 1 week where I didn't have anything prepared. And there are several weeks where I didn't have anything scheduled. And I'm recording on Wednesday night or Thursday morning. And my editor, Susan, is like a dream and is like, I got it. She's so kind and we work so well together. And I try not to be a procrastinator. And I'm working really hard at it. But I think sometimes it's also like, yeah, maybe, life causes things to happen. But what I'm personally doing, so to answer this question, have I ever been a procrastinator? Yes, I would say always. And part of the reason might be is I always say I came out of my mom's womb looking for friends, but then I was probably also walking out of my mom's womb looking for TV to watch. And so I think TV has delayed me a bit, but I figured out ways in like when I can watch TV because I love it so much. I'm like, okay, I can watch TV and do this kind of work. But if I'm grading or I'm writing, I need to listen to music that doesn't have words. So I listen to movie scores on Spotify, for example. And so the next thing that I've done is I do have a calendar. And one of the things for me is that what I've started, and this is in the last week, this coincides with the last week's episode. I bought a calendar where, it's from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and it's every hour. So I can schedule in time to be like, time for Alysa, time to walk Finnegan, I don't know, my new pup, or just to, I schedule in Survivor, which I realize I missed tonight. It's okay. Yes, I'm recording Wednesday. This comes out on Friday. Talk about procrastination. But I think it's like, if I sit down and I write everything in my calendar and important things I put, like even like really important things as I think about it, putting it into my Google Calendar so I get reminders, or just asking Siri to remind me of something is helpful. And then also when I schedule ahead on podcasting, for example, that helps. So anyone have tips for my students? And one of the things is, when I'm in teacher mode, this is sort of like a practice what you preach thing. Like, we can often tell other people how to do things, but then we don't do it very well ourselves. And I think there's probably a lot of people right now who heard that who are probably nodding their heads along with me. And so if you have any ideas, please let me know. You can share them on social media and I'll go back and share them with my students. But I also, I give up tips. I'm like, here's what I would suggest, put a reminder on your phone for your quiz so you don't forget to do the quiz, because those are like freebie points. Those are like free throws for basketball, right? So you definitely want reminders for the things that you need to do consistently. You don't want to forget to do them. If you have big appointments or big deadlines, then reminders a couple days beforehand and like the day before, that might be helpful. And then I share with them, for example, what they can do after each class to get ready for the exam. So you have 6 theories on this exam. After each theory, write down the notes on another sheet of paper and then have 6 theories across 2 pages, and then you can make comparisons and do things. So it's like I give this information to them, but I also participate in procrastination because I think that we all do the things that we immediately need to be done. Or if we're just like our cup is empty, then we're going to immediately sit down. So this has probably been the longest answer that I've had to any of these questions. The point is, we're all a work in progress. And so I've got some new things I'm trying. So maybe I'll follow back up. And as I always like to say with friends, get an accountability buddy. You can do homework together. And my TA came in, Lauren, who was on for Is Honesty the Best Policy? She came into my office and we were both like, hold on a minute. And we were both doing stuff. And for like 20 minutes, we sat there in silence. And then we both were like, we got so much done. Sometimes sitting somewhere with someone else and you're both doing stuff, you get more things done. So get an accountability buddy. Or it's like, hey, let's both work on this thing that's due in a week. Let's get a draft, and then let's go celebrate by going to Qdoba and getting our $5 burritos on Wednesday. Like, there's accountability and reward. I think that might be helpful. Okay, so the next question I have is, do you think music can help manage anxiety and depression, and why? I think music is really powerful, and I think that music reminds us of certain moments, and certain experiences, and I think that they can get us into good moods, calm moods. Like, as I experience anxiety, I spent so much time searching for like calming playlists. Like if you look at my Spotify, the recently played, there was like 20 in a row until I could find one. And I listen to it before I go to bed, and it really does calm me down. And I think that does help with anxiety. And I think like in the morning, I listen to upbeat oldies music. So I have a playlist for that. And I think anyone can follow me on Spotify. So I have a playlist for every class I teach. So those are themed. I have pump up jams. I just have a various lists, and I'm Alysa.Ann on Spotify, and I'll post that in show notes. And it's like, follow my playlists, or maybe we can make playlists together. But I definitely think music can help us manage it. I think that's not the only thing we're going to do, but if we find things that help us motivate us in the morning, get us ready to go to bed, help us calm down, then I think we should take advantage of that. And one of the questions that I also got that's related is, what is my favorite kind of music? And so I say, okay, here's my most random, most recently played playlist. Besides my calming sleep, go to bed music, I have the movie scores to listen to when I grade. I have a Downton Abbey score because I just saw that movie and it's amazing. And then I would say my playlists are the oldies. This is Lady Gaga on Spotify. This is Panic at the Disco on Spotify. And then I listen to pop music, which those would include. And then I listen to 90s or R&B and rap. So things that remind me of my childhood as well. I can decipher between what's good and bad music, I think, but I rather just like music that helps my mood, or I really like rhythms and beats and things like that, so that's important to me as well. But I'm pretty cheesy when it comes to music, so if you want to recommend something I should listen to be cooler as a music listener, please do so. Oh, okay, so this is a little bit more serious. They wrote down a question is, what is the meaning of life to you? And I mean, isn't that what life is about, is trying to figure out what the meaning of life is? And I guess my quick answer to that is that we grow up and we're raised by our parents or our caregivers to be functional adults that can contribute back to society, and that what we're all trying to do is figure out what our purpose in life is, and to bring as much joy to our own life and other people's life as possible. And I think that in a lot of ways, the purpose that I'm behind the most, or that, I mean, it makes sense that it's finding ways to make connections in relationships, that it's not just with friendships in this podcast, but it's also with what I teach, that I feel very strongly that we can be happy, healthy, and safe, and that through a lot of that can come communication. And I really believe that our relationships are the most significant part of life. And so being able to be successful in those, and to combat conflict, and to be able to share life with people we enjoy, I think all of that is important. So a lot of what I do is either to teach people ways or help people with being more effective and competent in their communication, figure out ways to solve problems in their relationships. And then I think that there's a lot of ways in which people are brought down so that they don't feel safe or happy or healthy. And that is something that I'm strongly against. So I support causes that support people who've been marginalized, so that they can everyone should be able to go after whatever they want. As long as you're not infringing on other people's rights, then there is no reason why people can't be happy, healthy, and safe. So I would say that is the meaning of life to me personally, but I do think it's becoming functional adults and enjoying the life we have and finding our own purpose and passion. So go out there and find your purpose and passion. Oh, this student is about to put my parents on blast. It says, what do you think is a poor habit of your parents you learned from growing up that you carry on with in life? Well, I feel like my parents aren't so much on blast, because I think we all inherit things from our parents, and from our siblings and people we spend a lot of time with also. I think that with my parents, one of the things that we'll say is that perfectionism is probably something. My dad says you come by it honestly. So it's something that comes from my parents. And so one of the things is it took me forever to hit record and publish on the first episode of Best Forevers. And now that I'm hitting 100 episodes and I'm about to hit 25 for Fatalities, which is a, twice a month podcast. Like thinking about there is no perfect podcast episode. They can never be perfect. And so actually podcasting has really helped with the perfectionism that I experience. And so whenever I experience perfectionism, I'm always like, thanks, mom and dad. But it's cool. We're friends now. I call them parentships. Okay, some of the next questions deal with communication and other things of that nature. So the student asks, what is the implication of having a strong opinion that differs from a spouse? And so this is a student from my dark side of communication class. And I think that one of the things, strong opinions might not be something, it can be challenging, it can be having conversations about. If you know about it from the beginning, it's something that you've decided to accept. It's like we all accept things in other people. Like, I'm willing to deal with this, but you have to deal with this part of me. I'm a 5 a.m. waker upper and I have 27 snoozes. So welcome to me being your spouse, right? But I think some of the implications that can come from a strong opinion is a potential for conflict. And I also think that depending on how strong that opinion is, meaning how much does that guide our daily life and the things that we believe and how we view the world, might impact a whole lot of things in your life. It could impact the way you view finances, how you raise children if you want to have children, how you go about doing things, and how you spend money, or what you'll do in life, and what are your goals together. And so one of the things, and one of my ex-boyfriends said this, and so we'll give him credit for at least this, right? And, if I've mentioned it here, it's one of those things where I don't remember, because anytime something like this comes up, I'm sure to talk about it in class as well. And that is, he always talked about, and I don't think this is his, he might have heard it somewhere else. I've never Googled to see if it's something that exists, but I think it makes good sense. And that is that in relationships, you can think of each other as a tree. And that the things that are rooted into the ground, that trunk is really strong. It's going to be hard to cut down the trunk of a tree, to break a trunk of a tree. Those are things that in us as people are unbreakable. Like, that's maybe religious beliefs, it might be political beliefs, or other worldviews that are, for example, in a relationship, are a deal breaker. And so what he always said is that on those serious issues, you should be on the same page. And so your trunk is the same, because you're stronger together when you have that in common. And then he would say that, like, the tree then has branches and there's leaves and they grow out, and those represent likes and dislikes and hobbies and all those kinds of things. And leaves fall off. You might no longer be interested in a hobby after one season. Branches can be broken if your two football teams are playing each other. But the idea is that those things are easily broken, or, they're not as serious, because the leaves, for example, will come back the next season. And so those are your likes and interests. They don't have to be the same. So he was into baseball. I'd rather be at a baseball game, but my favorite sport is college basketball and soccer, right? And then I'll also say volleyball. And so those things, like, that doesn't make a huge difference in our relationship if he's into baseball and I'm into college basketball, because those are things we can share together, or we can go with our friends to do our own things, or I could go with him to watch a baseball game in person, but I might not watch with him at home. But those things are not as much of a deal breaker as, say, religious beliefs, for example. And I think that's the implication of a strong opinion, is whether or not it's seen as a deal breaker in a relationship. Is it a trunk or is it a tree branch? If it's a trunk issue, then that might make it more difficult for the relationship to continue, because it's always going to be part of what your conflict might be rooted in. If it's a branch, it's not as big of a deal. You can figure that out and manage it. So I think that's the implication. So I thank you for that question. All right. The next one says, you mentioned wanting to reduce stigma about going to therapy. As someone who has considered going to therapy, how important, helpful, or detrimental having someone to confide in other than friends or family? I think that going to therapy is something that I support. I wish that it was more accessible to people who don't have insurance or don't have as much money, or, that these are systems that are overworked in universities and things like that. In Michigan, there's also some changes that could be really devastating to people's experience in therapy. And I feel very strongly that talking to other people can be a good thing. And I think it can be helpful to talk to people who aren't our family or friends, because that person, their stakes are in us and not in any other sort of agenda or anything else. And they provide an objective listening ear. They will ask questions or challenge or support in ways that you will not receive from family or friends. And although I think there are friends that are really great supporters and they gave great ideas and advice, but that only relying on friends or family to do that, I think, can be detrimental to them, because that's a lot of stress to carry. And in that, having a therapist, there will be things that you will hear or be asked, or ideas that will be given that you might not be able to get elsewhere, because they are going to have more of an objective viewpoint. Now, everyone's experience in therapy has probably not been positive. And so one of the things to consider is that if you go to a therapist and it doesn't click, then it's not that therapy doesn't click. You might need to find someone that clicks more with you. And so that might take a couple tries. So I say give it a whirl, and you're a student, so you should be able to go on campus. The one thing, though, again, is that there might be a waiting list. And so if you're interested in going and you have insurance, or you're on your family's insurance, you might be able to find somewhere locally that will take that insurance. And I think that it will enhance your ability to help yourself if you talk to someone who is objective. Okay, last sort of like personal or relational communication related question. And this one says, why do people get offended so easily? And I think this is a common topic that people discuss. I think you see it on social media a lot. And I think that the question is something that might be able to be worded differently. And what I mean by this is that as someone who thinks about communication, I'm more concerned, in my point of view, of being appropriate, effective, and ethical in my communication. And so, do I like inappropriate jokes? Have I laughed at them before? Yes. Might I share them with my brothers via text? Yes. Would I share that same joke on Twitter? Probably not. You have to know your audience. You have to know that there have been a tremendous amount of people and communities that have been marginalized, and therefore are starting or barely have voices and are vocalizing perhaps what language is not acceptable. And I think that what is happening is that it appears that everyone is offended, but really what we're talking about is, can we be better communicators? Are there lessons to be learned about our communication? Can our communication be improved? Are there words that we use that have some really detrimental issues with it? Are there real problems with some of the words we use and the way that we talk? Absolutely. Does language change? Yes. Should language change? Yes. And it should be reflective of our society. It should be inclusive. It shouldn't only focus on one or two groups. And so I think that, are there things sometimes where I'm like, everyone's overreacting, and I think there can be media panic or social media panic, and everyone's like freaking out and that sort of thing. But then I also think it's like, well, I can no longer say what I want to say. And part of that might be, well, think about who the audience is. And if the audience is saying, this is language that's inappropriate, this language is inappropriate in the workplace, or this language is offensive, instead of saying immediately, like, these people are getting offended, it might be more like, what can I do to make my communication better? Because especially if my students are communication majors and minors, what is going to make you more adaptable, going to be able to connect with other people, be more successful in the workplace and in your relationships, will be expanding ways in which you can communicate in a more effective, appropriate, and ethical way. And some words and jokes and things like that don't need to be said. And I say this a lot. Just because you think it doesn't mean you need to say it. So I don't think it's so much that people get offended easily. I think it's that there are things that are changing, and change can be hard, but change is also needed. And that sometimes that we could probably listen a little bit more to what people are saying, listen to people, and then take into account, one of the things, and I'll give an example, and for some people it's not a big deal, but when I teach my gender communication class, I talk about the use of you guys to represent all exclusive people, and it doesn't include everyone. And it's like, but that's just the way we say it, but we never question why. So I can walk into a college classroom and go, hey guys, and no one bat an eyelash. But if I went into the same classroom and I said, hey ladies, it'd be like, what? Why are you only referring to women? And it's like, well, why is it that way? Because that's the way the language is. And it's like, that doesn't mean that the language needs to be used. And maybe it's okay for, a 20-year-old, but it might not be okay for a 60-year-old that you're communicating with at work. So what can we do to think about what language is appropriate with which audience and when? And obviously anything that's sexist, racist, transphobic, homophobic, ageist, classist, all those things aren't necessary anyways. All that does is create issues and is unethical. So if people are getting offended by those kinds of things, then I'm not surprised that they are. Okay, so these last questions are fun. One I already answered about my favorite music, so I'll move that. Okay, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grow up? So I want to be a fashion designer, but I couldn't draw, so I had a notebook where I would draw the same dress over and over. And funny enough, it looked kind of like the design of Andy's dress in Pretty in Pink, or just imagine it being kind of like Marge Simpson's dress that she wears in every single episode because she's a cartoon. I also wanted to be a movie screenplay writer, but I never wrote anything, so that's cool. So being a professor was totally on my radar. Wink, wink. Okay, if you could travel to one place in the world, where would it be and why? Oh, I think I would go back to Paris. I've always wanted to go to Paris. I've had sort of an obsession with the Eiffel Tower, and I think it's because some of my family background, we were assuming was French, and I did like one of those DNA tests. Turns out I'm 100%. Okay, I was going to do Lizzo, but I'm not 100%, but we are, in fact, do have some French in us, so maybe my obsession was rightly so. And I just had a wonderful time when I went there with Tara a couple summers ago, and it's beautiful, and there's macarons, and I can eat those every single day. So good. Okay, what's your zodiac sign, and do you believe in it? Okay. My zodiac sign is Gemini, and me and my friend Adri, who's the host of Accio Politics, we're both Geminis, and we talk about having big Gemini energy, and we did this on the podcast Make It Modern when we talked to Ashley of that podcast. And so Gemini is like the twin, it's like big energy. I think that I believe in it to a point. Like, I think there's information that is reflective of who I am, and sometimes I read things and I'm like, that sounds like me. And other times I'm like, that doesn't sound like me at all. But I do like having big Gemini energy. I like having big Gemini energy with other people, and I do have like one of the horoscope apps on my phone. So to that degree, yes. Do I think it dictates everything I do? Absolutely not. And not talking about big Gemini energy, I got some big Cancer energy. What's your zodiac sign, Ferguson? He's like, I have to be here for the AMA. He's the producer. Okay. So the next question is, what is your favorite place to eat? Now, there have been many restaurants that have been absolutely delicious, and meals that even like Tara and I had. in France where we had like just a charcuterie board full of meats and cheeses, and we had wine, and it was amazing. So I'm like really on board with the charcuterie. But like if we're talking like I live in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, and one of the funniest things, I moved here in 2013, and the next year it was announced, we're getting an Olive Garden, and everyone was so hype. And I was like, oh my God, is it 1989? So we don't have all the restaurants of the big cities and things like that. But when we got the Noodles and Company, I was pretty excited. And I like going there because you can change it up. Today I'll just have macaroni and cheese. No, today I'll have truffle mac and cheese. You know, I'm going to add some broccoli. You know, I'm going to get butter noodles, put some shrimp in there. Like, so I like that. And I love carbs and I love cheese. So, and it's reasonable. Reasonably priced. Okay. What's your all-time favorite movie? This question is hard because I think there's a wide range of movies, and I think we all know that Anne of Green Gables is one of my favorite movies of all time. And that certainly was as a kid growing up. I loved that, and Annie and American Tail, and those are probably, and The Parent Trap, the original one, not the one with the Lohan twins, and well, Lohan playing the twins. But I swear to God, every time I watch TV and I'll be like, ooh, The Parent Trap, I stop, hoping that's the original one with Haley Mills. And it never is. It makes me so mad. So I would say those are movies that really reflect my childhood. But some of my favorite movies that I really enjoy, Goodfellas by Martin Scorsese. I love Silence of the Lambs. I think it has one of my favorite scene twists in the movie, or in movies at all. I used to love South Park. That movie is funny. I didn't usually watch the show very much, but I thought the movie was hysterical. And then more recently, I would say that I really have enjoyed Booksmart, 8th Grade, and then the movies by Jordan Peele, so like Get Out and Us. And so I watch TV more. So if I think of anything else, I'll post some of that. But those are, so that was supposed to be one time. That was about 73. Okay. And the last question of the day. Okay. So this person asked, how many kindergartners could you defeat in a fight? Parentheses, no weapons. They're coming at you all at once. I feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Kindergarten Cop. I think one kindergartner could take me down because I have not spent a lot of time around children. If you've listened to one of the Taconic Parkway Crash episode of Fatalities, I don't know if 2-year-olds wear diapers. Like, I don't know much about them. I love my nephew, Mason. I love my nephew, Indigo. I love my niece, Juniper. I love my friends' children. But I have cats and dogs, so I know very little. I teach college, so I'm thinking one kindergartner can take me down. What do you think? How many kindergartners could take you down? And again, there's no weapons. They're coming at you all at once. And I would love to hear what you think and how you would answer that question. So until next time, friends, think about your closest friends, because without them, who would we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Hi, I'm Chris.
And I'm Anna.
Join us with our new podcast that'll be coming out soon called Becoming Friends.
Yeah, it's a podcast where we kind of sort of know each other through the internet, and we thought we would be BFFs in real life. So we're trying to make that come to life through podcast. So you can become our friend too if you listen along.
Yeah, join our journey and maybe we'll all make some friends out of it. We're going to have topics that are deeper and serious, and then we're going to have games and
a copious amount of drinking.
Oh, yes. Yes, it'll be fun. Please join us.
Goodbye.
Bye.
We're becoming friends.
Okay.